Lucas Reed stood in Aria Vale's penthouse at 2 in the morning, watching her sleep in sheets that cost more than his rent, knowing his daughter would ask where Daddy went tonight, knowing his father's ventilator beeped 3 floors above a hospital cafeteria where he couldn't afford coffee. The contract sat in his jacket pocket, signed, notarized, irreversible. She'd written the terms in language that didn't pretend. His body for her pregnancy, her money for his survival. No love, no promises. Just biology and desperation dressed up in legal terminology. And tonight, staring at the woman who owned his nights but refused to know his name beyond the signature line, Lucas wondered which would kill him first, the shame of what he was doing or the terrifying realization that some part of him had started to need her. Before we get into Lucas's story, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. The fluorescent lights in St. Catherine's Hospital made everything look like it was already dead. Lucas had been staring at the same water stain on the ceiling tile for 20 minutes, trying to calculate whether he could survive on 1 meal a day if it meant his father could stay on the transplant list another month. The math didn't work. It never worked. "Mr. Reed?" Lucas stood, his knees cracking from too many nights on the waiting room chairs. "Doctor." Patel looked tired, the kind of tired that came from delivering bad news professionally for 20 years. "Your father's stable for now, but without the surgery." She didn't finish. They both knew the sentence ended with a timeline neither wanted to speak aloud. "The financial office said your application for assistance was denied again." "I'm sorry. I pushed as hard as I could." Lucas nodded because words required energy he didn't have. Behind him, his phone buzzed. Mira, his ex-wife, with her daily text about next month's child support. Another number that didn't add up. Another impossible equation. "How long?" Lucas asked. 6 weeks. Maybe 8 if we're lucky." Luck. Lucas almost laughed. He'd stopped believing in luck around the same time he'd started believing in hospital bills that multiplied like cancer cells. He drove home in his 15-year-old Honda with the check engine light that had been on so long it felt like a decorative feature. His apartment building smelled like curry and cigarettes, the kind of building where everyone minded their business because everyone had something they didn't want noticed. Sophie was asleep when he got home, her small body curled around the stuffed rabbit he'd found at a thrift store for her 4th birthday. She was 7 now, and the rabbit had seen better days, but she carried it everywhere. Lucas stood in her doorway, watching her breathe, feeling the familiar weight of inadequacy press against his chest. He'd been good at interior design once. Really good. The kind of good that got him featured in local magazines and contracts with boutique hotels. Then the economy shifted, his marriage imploded, and clients who wanted custom work suddenly wanted IKEA catalogs brought to life. The freelance gigs dried up, the savings disappeared, and now he worked for an agency that paid him 30% of what he was worth to redesign suburban living rooms for people who said things like "make it pop" and expected miracles with beige paint samples. His phone buzzed again. Not Mira this time, a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Reed, I have a proposition that might interest you. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Meridian Tower, 47th floor. Come alone. AV." Lucas stared at the message. Meridian Tower was the kind of building where the doormen wore nicer suits than he owned. The kind of place where his Honda would look like a clerical error in the parking garage. He should delete it. Probably a scam. Definitely a scam. He saved the number instead. Fuck. The lobby of Meridian Tower had marble floors that echoed with wealth. Lucas felt every thread of his 5-year-old blazer as he crossed to the elevator bank. The security guard looked at him like he might steal the potted orchids. "I have an appointment," Lucas said. 47th floor. The guard checked his tablet, eyebrows rising slightly. "Mr. Reed? That's me. Elevator 3, she's expecting you." She. Lucas stepped into an elevator with mirrors on 3 sides, watching himself multiply into infinity. He looked like what he was, a man who'd stopped sleeping through the night somewhere around his daughter's 2nd birthday and never figured out how to start again. The doors opened directly into a penthouse. Not a hallway, not a lobby, just straight into someone's home. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city like a kingdom. The furniture was the kind Lucas designed but could never afford. Everything white and chrome and expensive in a way that didn't need to announce itself. "You came." She stood by the windows, backlit by afternoon sun. Mid-20s, Lucas guessed. Maybe younger. She wore a black suit that probably cost what he made in 3 months, her dark hair pulled back in a way that showed off the kind of bone structure that made people stumble over their words. You didn't leave much room for interpretation, Lucas said. Come alone sounds like either a job offer or a murder. Her mouth moved, not quite a smile. Sit. It wasn't an invitation. Lucas sat on a sofa that felt like sitting on a cloud made of money. She didn't sit. She stood across from him, hands folded behind her back, studying him with the intensity of someone appraising property. I've had you investigated, Mr. Reed. Thoroughly. I know about your father's condition, your financial situation, your daughter, your ex-wife's lawyer, the 3 credit cards you're rotating like a shell game. Should I continue? Lucas's jaw tightened. Is this where you offer to be my sugar mama? Because I've got to tell you, I'm not really the boy toy type. No, she said. This is where I offer you $300,000. The number hit him like a physical thing. Lucas forgot how to breathe for a second. In exchange for what? A kidney? A child. The silence stretched out, filled with the distant sound of traffic 47 floors below. I'm sorry, what? She moved then, crossing to a desk and retrieving a folder. She placed it on the coffee table between them with the precision of someone who'd rehearsed the moment. My name is Arya Vale. I'm 26. I inherited my father's company when I was 23. I have 12 board members who think my age makes me temporary, and a trust fund that doesn't fully release until I'm 30 or produce an heir, whichever comes first. I don't have time for dating. I don't have interest in marriage. I don't believe in love, and I certainly don't believe in relying on someone else for my future. So you're, what, shopping for a sperm donor? I'm offering you a contract. She gestured to the folder. You provide what I need, I provide what you need. The terms are explicit. $300,000, $100 immediately, the rest upon confirmed pregnancy. You come here each evening between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. You leave before dawn. You don't ask about my life, I don't ask about yours. When I'm pregnant, the contract terminates. You walk away. No parental rights, no obligations, no further contact. Lucas opened the folder because his hands needed something to do. The contract was 30 pages of legal terminology that basically outlined exactly what she'd said. Clinical, transactional, horrifying. This is insane. This is practical. This is paying someone for sex. This is paying someone for a biological service. The sex is incidental. Lucas laughed, the kind of laugh that hurt coming out. Lady, I don't know what kind of guys you usually deal with, but I deal with men who want something from me. Power, money, access, status. You're the first person I've found who wants nothing I actually care about. She sat then, finally across from him. Up close, her eyes were gray, the color of a sky deciding whether to storm. You need money for your father's surgery. You need to get your ex-wife's lawyer off your back. You need stability for your daughter. I need this. It's honest, Mr. Reed, more honest than most arrangements between men and women. It's prostitution. It's a contract between consenting adults with clearly defined terms. I'm not asking you to pretend to love me. I'm not asking you to lie. I'm asking you to show up, do what nature intended, and take care of your family. She leaned forward slightly. Your father has 6 weeks, maybe 8. How many other offers are you expecting? The cruelty of it, the absolute accuracy, made Lucas want to throw the folder in her face. Instead, he read it. Every page. Every clause. Every degrading, desperate, impossible term. Party A, Vale, agrees to compensate Party B, Reed, for biological services rendered. Emotional attachment is expressly forbidden. Termination occurs upon confirmed pregnancy or after 12 months, whichever comes first. I need time to think, Lucas said, though they both knew he didn't. You have 24 hours. After that, I find someone else. She stood, signaling the meeting's end. The elevator will take you down. Lucas stood, the folder in his hands feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. At the elevator, he turned back. She was already at the window, looking out at her kingdom. Why me? He asked. She didn't turn around. You have kind eyes, and you're desperate enough to say yes, but decent enough to hate yourself for it. That's exactly what I need. The elevator doors closed on her silhouette. and Lucas descended 47 floors with a contract that could save his father's life and destroy whatever was left of his soul. Sophie wanted pancakes for dinner. Lucas made them, watching her draw faces in the syrup while he pretended everything was normal. His phone sat on the counter like a bomb. "Daddy, you're quiet." "Just tired, sweetheart." "Is Grandpa okay?" "Grandpa's—" Lucas pushed a pancake around his plate. "Grandpa's fighting hard." Sophie nodded, serious beyond her years. She'd learned too early that adults didn't always have answers, that sometimes "we'll see" meant probably not. After she went to bed, Lucas drove to the hospital. His father was awake, tubes running from his arms like he was being slowly uploaded to a machine. "You look like hell," his father said, voice raspy. "You look worse." His father laughed, which turned into a cough that lasted too long. When it passed, he fixed Lucas with eyes that had once seemed so strong. "Don't do anything stupid for me, son." Define stupid. "Whatever you're thinking about doing. That look on your face, I've seen it before. When your mother was sick. When the business failed. When Mira left." His father's hand found Lucas's. "Sometimes the cost is too high, even when the alternative is worse." Lucas thought about the contract in his car, about Aria Vale's gray eyes and her clinical proposition, about dignity versus desperation. What if it's the only way? Then you do it, and you forgive yourself after. His father squeezed his hand. "But you don't do it for me. You do it for Sophie. You do it for yourself. You do it because you choose to, not because you have to." The distinction felt meaningless. Lucas left before his father could see him cry. At 11:47 p.m., Lucas texted the number. "I need to see the contract again." At 11:48 p.m., Aria replied. "Elevator code is 4793. Come now." At 11:52 p.m., Lucas stood outside Meridian Tower, watching his reflection in the glass doors. At 11:53 p.m., he went inside. Aria answered the elevator in the same black suit, like she'd been waiting in it. Maybe she had been. "Questions?" she asked. "About 1,000. "I'll answer 3. Lucas followed her to that same white sofa. The city glittered beyond the windows, indifferent to whatever was about to happen. "First question," Lucas said. "What happens if I want to stop?" Covered in Section 12. Either party can terminate with 2 weeks' notice. You keep whatever's been paid. No penalties. Second question, what if you don't get pregnant? Covered in Section 8. After 12 months, the contract expires. You get the full amount regardless. Third question, Lucas looked at her directly. What kind of person does this? That's not about the contract. You said 3 questions. That's my third. Aria's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those gray eyes. The kind of person who's tired of wanting things she can't control. The kind of person who learned that vulnerability is a weakness people exploit. The kind of person who'd rather buy honesty than wait for it. She tilted her head slightly. Any other questions cost you money. 10,000 per answer. Jesus. I don't believe in him either. Are you in or out? Lucas thought about his father's ventilator, about Sophie's rabbit with one ear hanging by threads, about the check engine light in his Honda and the eviction notice he'd hidden in his glove compartment. I need a pen. Aria produced one from somewhere. Expensive, heavy, the kind of pen that knew it was signing something important. Lucas found the signature line on page 30. Party B, Lucas read, hereby agrees to all terms as outlined. His hand shook, just slightly, just enough that his signature looked like it was written by someone drowning. Done, he said. Aria took the contract, producing a second copy from the folder. She signed both with the efficient grace of someone who signed away pieces of her life regularly. Then she handed him a check, the paper kind, like something from another era, $100,000, made out in her precise handwriting. The master bedroom is through there, she said, pointing down a hallway. I'll give you 5 minutes. She walked away, leaving Lucas alone with a check that solved everything and a feeling that he'd just sold something he'd never get back. The bedroom was as cold and beautiful as the rest of the penthouse. White sheets, gray walls, windows that showed the city sleeping. Aria appeared in the doorway, wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than his car. Rules, she said. No kissing, no eye contact during, No talking unless necessary. This isn't intimacy. This is biology. Right, biology. Lucas felt like he was in someone else's life, someone else's nightmare. She let the robe fall. Lucas looked away, which made her laugh, small, bitter. We're past modesty now, Mr. Reed. Lucas. My name is Lucas. I know your name. I don't need to use it. She moved to the bed, lying back with the mechanical precision of someone following instructions. This will be easier if you think of it like any other job. But it wasn't like any other job. It was nothing like any other job. And as Lucas forced himself through the motions of something that should have been intimate, but felt like signing away pieces of his humanity one moment at a time, he understood exactly what Arya had bought. Not his body, his complicity, his willingness to pretend that need could justify anything. Afterward, she disappeared into an ensuite bathroom. Lucas dressed in the dark, his hands still shaking. When Arya emerged, wrapped again in that expensive robe, she was holding a glass of water. You leave now, she said. Tomorrow, same time. Tomorrow? Already? Conception is statistics. The more attempts, the higher the probability. She handed him a keycard. This gets you up after 10 p.m. Don't come before. Don't come after 1 a.m. Don't deviate from the schedule. Lucas took the card. It was heavy plastic with a magnetic strip and no identifying information. Anonymous access to her life. Arya Miss Vale, she corrected. We're not familiar. Miss Vale. This is... He didn't have words for what this was. This is what you agreed to. The elevator is waiting. Lucas left because there was nothing else to do. The elevator descended through 47 floors of expensive darkness, and when he reached his car, he sat in the driver's seat for 20 minutes before he could make his hands work the ignition. The check was in his pocket. Salvation in the form of a bank draft. His phone showed 1:47 a.m. Sophie would wake up in 5 hours, asking for breakfast, asking where Daddy had been. Lucas started the engine and drove home, the check engine light glowing like a moral commentary, guiding him through streets that suddenly felt like they belonged to someone else's city entirely. The bank teller looked at the check like Lucas had handed her Monopoly money. Sir, this is... I'll need to get a manager. Lucas waited while 3 different people examined it, made phone calls, typed things into computers. Finally, a woman in a suit approached with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Reed, we'll need to hold this for verification. Standard procedure for amounts over... How long? 3 to 5 business days. Lucas felt something inside him crack. My father needs surgery. I need this now. I understand, sir, but can you call the account? Verify it directly. The manager hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes later, she returned looking slightly shell-shocked. The funds are verified. I can make $70,000 available today. The rest when it fully clears. $70,000. Enough for the deposit on his father's surgery. Enough to tell Dr. Patel that miracles existed after all. Lucas called the hospital from the parking lot. Dr. Patel's voice shifted from professional exhaustion to cautious hope as he explained about the funds. I'll schedule him for Tuesday, she said. This is... Mr. Reed, I don't know what you did, but... Don't ask, Lucas said. Please don't ask. He picked Sophie up from his neighbor's apartment, Mrs. Chen, who watched her on days when Lucas couldn't afford actual childcare. Sophie ran to him with her backpack bouncing, her rabbit tucked under one arm. Can we get ice cream? We can get whatever you want. They went to the good ice cream place, the one with flavors that cost $7 a scoop. Sophie got birthday cake with rainbow sprinkles. Lucas got coffee because he was running on 3 hours of sleep and a sense of unreality that hadn't faded since he'd left Arya's penthouse. You seem happy, Sophie said around a mouthful of sprinkles. Grandpa's getting his surgery. Her eyes went wide. Really? He's going to be okay? He's going to fight. That's all we can ask. Sophie hugged him then, her sticky ice cream hands leaving marks on his shirt. Lucas held her and tried not to think about where the money came from. About the woman who'd bought him like a service she could schedule. About the fact that tonight at 10 p.m., he'd go back for another transaction. The days developed a rhythm that felt like drowning in slow motion. Lucas worked his design jobs, picked up Sophie, made dinner, put her to bed. At 9:30 p.m., he'd shower, dress in clothes that felt like a costume, and drive to Meridian Tower. Arya never varied. Same suit, same rules, same clinical efficiency. They'd go to the bedroom, they'd perform the biological function she'd contracted for. She'd disappear into the bathroom. He'd leave before she came out. No kissing, no eye contact, no talking beyond the necessary. Tomorrow, try to arrive by 10:15, she'd say. Studies show timing matters. I'm not a sperm donor at a clinic. No, you're being significantly better compensated. The responses killed whatever protest Lucas might have offered. She wasn't wrong. He was being paid extremely well to do something that, in any other context, people did for free. But those other contexts included desire, affection, some spark of human connection beyond scheduled appointments. This had none of that. 2 weeks in, Lucas started noticing details he'd trained himself to ignore. The way Arya's hands shook slightly when she dropped her robe. The scar on her rib cage, small, surgical. The fact that she always looked away first, like eye contact might accidentally create something the contract forbade. You have a scar, Lucas said one night, breaking the no-talking rule. Appendectomy when I was 19. Her voice was sharp. No more questions. It's just conversation. Which costs you money, remember? But she didn't move toward the bathroom yet. Why do you care? Because you're a person, not a contract. I'm paying you a significant amount to treat me exactly like a contract. She pulled the robe tighter. Don't get confused about what this is. But Lucas was already confused. Somewhere between transaction 12 and transaction 15, his body had started responding to her in ways that felt less mechanical. The way she'd tuck her hair behind her ear when she was thinking, the tiny gasp she'd make when... No. He shut that down. That way led to attachment, and attachment violated every clause in their agreement. His father's surgery went well, better than expected. Dr. Patel used words like optimistic and recovery potential. Lucas stood in the ICU, watching his father sleep without tubes down his throat for the first time in months, and felt the guilt settle in his chest like concrete. You did good, son, his father whispered when he woke up. I did what I had to do. Still counts. Lucas wished that were true. He wished the money felt clean, but every dollar smelled like Arya's expensive perfume and the sound of her breathing in that dark bedroom where nothing was supposed to mean anything. His phone buzzed. Arya texting for the first time outside their scheduled hours. Need to move tonight to 11 p.m. Board dinner running late. Lucas stared at the message. She'd never adjusted the schedule before. Never acknowledged that she had a life beyond those 3 hours where he existed in her world. Fine, he texted back. At 11 p.m., he used the keycard. The elevator opened to Arya still in her business clothes. Tailored pants, silk blouse, hair starting to escape its strict arrangement. She looked tired. Actually tired. Not just professionally composed. The bedroom, she said, already walking. You look exhausted. Biology doesn't care about exhaustion. She started unbuttoning her blouse. Let's just get this done. Something in Lucas snapped. Maybe it was the relief about his father. Maybe it was the accumulation of 23 nights of pretending to be a machine. Maybe it was just the fundamental human need to be seen as something more than a service provider. No, he said. Arya stopped, her blouse half unbuttoned. Excuse me? I said no, not tonight. You're exhausted. This is... He gestured at the space between them. We're not robots. We're also not in a relationship where you get to decide when... I'm deciding when I'm comfortable participating. That's my right even in your contract. She stared at him, something like anger flickering in those gray eyes. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. Real laughter, not the bitter sound he'd heard before. You're refusing to fulfill your contracted obligation because you think I'm too tired? I'm suggesting that maybe we're human beings first and contractual obligations second. How noble. But she was buttoning her blouse back up. Fine. What do you suggest? I don't know. Normal people would probably just talk. We're not normal people. We're strangers operating under a business arrangement. Right, business. Lucas looked around the penthouse, still perfect, still cold. When was the last time you did something that wasn't business? That's not relevant. When was the last time someone asked about your day? My assistant asks about my day. Because you pay her to care, that doesn't count. Lucas moved to the kitchen, surprised when she didn't stop him. You have food in here or just designer water? I don't cook. I do. Sit. I don't take orders in my own home. Then stand, but I'm making eggs because I skipped dinner and your board meeting made me late and I'm starving. He found eggs, butter, bread. The kitchen was absurdly well equipped for someone who didn't cook. Wolf range, sub-zero fridge, knives that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Lucas made scrambled eggs the way his father taught him, with cream and patience. Arya sat at the counter, watching him with an expression he couldn't read. Why are you doing this? She asked. Because you look human for the first time since I met you, and I kind of want to see if it lasts. He plated the eggs, pushed one toward her. Eat. She picked up the fork like it might explode. Took a bite. Her eyes closed slightly. When did you last eat? Lucas asked. Lunch. Around 1. 12 hours ago. Very healthy. I'm busy. Being busy isn't a virtue. It's just a way to avoid having a life. Lucas ate his own eggs, the domesticity of the moment completely surreal. Your board dinner went late. What happened? Why do you care? Because I'm here. Because for once you look like an actual person instead of a contract in designer suits. Because maybe I'm curious about who you are when you're not managing me like a calendar appointment. Arya was quiet for a long moment. Then, they want to sell. 3 of the board members have been talking to a conglomerate about acquisition. They think I'm too young, too female, too stubborn to actually grow the company. Are they right? About which part? Any of it. I'm definitely stubborn, a ghost of a smile. The rest is just their fear talking. The company tripled its value since I took over. But they remember my father, and I'm not him, so I must be inadequate. Or you're different, which is threatening. Same result. Lucas finished his eggs, watching her process what might have been the first honest conversation she'd had in months. What does your company even do? Venture capital, tech startups mostly. We find innovation and fund it before anyone else sees the potential. So you gamble rich people's money on other people's dreams. That's actually fairly accurate. She almost smiled again. You'd hate it. Too much bullshit, too many people pretending vision they don't have. Unlike interior design, where everyone knows exactly what they want and communicates it perfectly. I can't tell if you're joking. I can't either anymore. Lucas stood, collecting plates. I should go. You need sleep. We didn't complete the contract terms for tonight. We're adults with a 12-month agreement. One night won't destroy the statistics. He headed for the elevator, then stopped. Arya? What? You're not inadequate. You're just operating in a world designed for men who think power means never showing weakness. He pressed the elevator button. The board members are scared because you're actually good at this. The elevator arrived. Lucas stepped in, and for the first time, Arya followed to the threshold. Lucas, his actual name in her mouth. Thank you. For the eggs. It's just eggs. No, she said quietly. It's not. The doors closed on her gray eyes, looking almost soft, and Lucas descended through 47 floors, wondering what the hell he'd just done, and why breaking the rules felt more honest than following them ever had. The eggs changed something neither of them acknowledged directly, but the shift was there anyway, stubborn as gravity. 3 nights later, when Lucas arrived at 10:08 p.m., Arya was standing in the kitchen with takeout containers spread across the counter. Thai or Italian? She asked without preamble. Lucas stared at the food, then at her. She was still in her work clothes, but had kicked off her heels, standing barefoot on marble floors that probably cost more per square foot than his entire apartment. Is this a test? It's dinner. I didn't eat again. You were right about that being stupid. She gestured at the containers. I ordered too much. You might as well help. What about the schedule? What about it? We have until 1 a.m. Biology doesn't require an empty stomach. But her hands betrayed her, fidgeting with the hem of her blouse. Uncertain. Almost nervous. Lucas chose Thai because it smelled better. They ate standing up at first, the counter between them like a demilitarized zone. Arya picked at her pad thai with the cautious approach of someone who'd forgotten that food could be more than fuel. Sophie asked about the surgery money, Lucas said, breaking the silence that had stretched too long. Arya's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Your daughter? Yeah, she's 7, smart as hell, doesn't miss much. What did you tell her? That I got a new client, big project, good money. The lie tasted worse than usual. She asked if that meant we could get a real tree for Christmas instead of the plastic one from the storage unit. Can you? Lucas shrugged. That wasn't part of the budget calculation. The money's for medical bills and back payments. Christmas trees are luxury items. That's depressing. That's practical. You invented practical, remember? Arya set down her fork, studying him with those gray eyes that saw too much. You resent me for this. I resent the situation. There's a difference. Is there? Lucas met her gaze directly, breaking one of her own rules. You're not holding a gun to my head. I signed the contract because I needed what you offered. That's on me, not you. But you hate it anyway. I hate that I had to make the choice. I hate that my father's life has a price tag. I hate that I leave my daughter sleeping to come here and pretend this is normal. He pushed his container away. But I don't hate you. You're just the only person who was honest about the transaction. Something flickered across Arya's face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. Everyone else wanted to pretend it was something more? Everyone else wanted me to be grateful and complicit without actually saying what they were buying. At least you put it in writing. That's the saddest defense of contract law I've ever heard. Welcome to my life. Everything's the saddest version of itself. Arya almost smiled. Almost. Then she moved around the counter, eliminating the safe distance between them, and Lucas's pulse kicked up despite himself. We should go to the bedroom, she said, but there was a question in it now. Permission being asked rather than assumed. Yeah, Lucas said. We should. The mechanics hadn't changed, but the context had. Arya still had her rules, no kissing, no eye contact during, but the silence felt different, less clinical, more like two people trying not to acknowledge that something was happening beyond the biological imperative written into Section 3, Paragraph 7 of a 30-page contract. Afterward, instead of immediately disappearing into the bathroom, Arya stayed. Just for a moment, just long enough that Lucas felt the weight of her presence beside him in the dark. Your father, she said quietly. The surgery worked? So far. He's in recovery. Doctors are cautiously optimistic, which is the best we've heard in months. Good. A pause. That's good? Then she was gone, and Lucas dressed in the dark, wondering when the bathroom breaks had started feeling like escapes rather than just practical transitions. The pattern repeated. Dinner before. Silence after. Small questions that violated the spirit of the contract, if not the letter. Lucas learned that Arya took her coffee black with exactly 1 sugar, that she'd learned Mandarin because her father thought it would be useful, then never used it because spite was more satisfying than practicality, that she'd been engaged once to someone appropriate and had walked away 3 weeks before the wedding when she realized appropriate felt like suffocation. He wanted me to quit working, Arya said one night, picking at Indian food neither of them was really eating. Said the company could hire a CEO, that I should focus on charity work and hosting dinners, be decorative and useful in the right way. What happened when you said no? He said I was being selfish, that real women understood sacrifice. Her laugh was sharp. I told him real men understood that women weren't accessories to their ambition. He called me a cold bitch. I called off the wedding. My father stopped speaking to me for 6 months. He sided with the fiancé? He sided with tradition, expectations, the way things should be. Arya's fingers tightened on her fork. He died thinking I'd failed at being what women are supposed to be. Maybe he died wrong. Doesn't make it hurt less. Lucas understood that. The way disappointment could live in your chest long after the person who planted it was gone. My ex-wife said I was married to my work, that I cared more about designing other people's homes than building our own. Was she right? Partially. I cared about being good at something, about mattering in some quantifiable way. She wanted me to matter to her more than I mattered to myself, and I didn't know how to do that. He pushed rice around his plate. Turns out I wasn't good at either. Lost the marriage, lost the career trajectory. 2 failures for the price of 1. You have your daughter. I have Sophie, who deserves better than a father who sells himself to pay medical bills. You're providing for your family. That's not selling yourself, that's survival. You would say that. You're the one who bought me. I contracted for a service. There's a difference. Is there? Lucas threw her own words back at her. Arya's jaw tightened. You're not a victim here. You chose this. And you chose to make the offer. We're both complicit in our own bullshit. He stood, suddenly tired of the circular logic that let both of them sleep at night. I should go. We still have 40 minutes. I know, I'm leaving anyway. He made it to the elevator before she called out. Lucas? He turned. She was standing in the kitchen, barefoot and uncertain, looking more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. Did I say something wrong? She asked. No, you said something too right. That's worse. The elevator came. Lucas stepped in. The doors started closing, and he watched her watching him, neither of them willing to acknowledge what was growing in the space between transactions. Sophie's school called the next afternoon while Lucas was pricing fixtures for a bathroom remodel that would never make anyone happy. His daughter had punched another kid in the face. The principal's voice carried that special tone of administrative disappointment reserved for parents who were clearly failing. This is the 3rd incident this month, Mr. Reed. Lucas sat in his car outside the plumbing supply store, closing his eyes. What happened? Sophie refuses to say. The other child claims she started it without provocation. Sophie doesn't do anything without provocation. Regardless, there are consequences for violence. She's suspended for 3 days. You'll need to pick her up immediately. Lucas drove to the school with his hands too tight on the wheel. Sophie sat in the principal's office with her arms crossed, her rabbit clutched to her chest, looking small and furious in equal measure. What happened? Lucas asked once they were in the car. Silence. Sophie? He said you were a loser. Her voice was small. He said his dad said you can't even pay rent on time, and that's why we live in a bad building. Lucas's chest tightened. So you hit him. So I defended you. With your fists. With what I had. Lucas pulled into a coffee shop parking lot because he couldn't drive and have this conversation simultaneously. Baby, you can't hit people because they say mean things. Why not? Mean things hurt too. I know they do, but there are better ways to handle it. Like what? Letting them win? Sophie's eyes were wet, but she refused to cry. Like pretending it doesn't matter when people are cruel? Lucas looked at his 7-year-old daughter, who'd already learned that the world was unfair and that sometimes survival meant fighting back, and felt every inadequate parenting moment of the past 3 years settle on his shoulders. Sometimes we have to be bigger than the cruelty, he said, knowing it sounded hollow. Sometimes we have to choose dignity over retaliation. That's stupid. Yeah, sometimes it is. He took her for ice cream again because he didn't know what else to do. Sophie got chocolate chip. Lucas got nothing because his stomach was a knot of guilt. Daddy, are we poor? Sophie asked, chocolate on her chin. We're managing. That's not an answer. Yes, we're poor. For now. Is that why you're sad all the time? Lucas's throat closed. I'm not sad all the time. You are. You think I don't notice, but I do. You come home late and you smell different and you look like you're carrying something heavy. I'm just tired, sweetheart. That's not the same as sad, but you're both. Sophie kicked her legs under the table, too short to reach the floor. Is it because of Grandpa? Partly. Is it because of me? No, never because of you. Then what? Lucas wanted to explain about adult compromises, about the choices you make when all options are bad and you just pick the least destructive one, about how sometimes providing for your family means doing things that hollow you out from the inside while everyone pretends not to notice. Sometimes grown-up problems don't have good answers, he said instead. Sometimes we just do our best and hope it's enough. Sophie considered this with the seriousness of a child forced to understand too much too young. Your best is pretty good, Daddy. Lucas hugged her then, holding on probably too long, feeling the weight of everything he was doing to give her stability while simultaneously destabilizing himself. That night at 10:15 p.m., Lucas used the keycard with hands that felt heavier than usual. The elevator opened to Arya standing by the windows, still in her suit, silhouetted against the city lights. "You're late," she said without turning. "My daughter got suspended from school for punching a kid who called me a loser." Arya turned then, surprise cracking through her usual composure. "Is she okay?" "She's fine. Proud of herself, actually. The other kid's nose is probably sore, but he'll live." Lucas dropped onto the sofa without invitation. "She asked me if we're poor." "What did you say?" "The truth. That we're managing. Which is a polite way of saying, yes, we're poor, but I'm doing questionable things to fix it." Arya moved to the bar, poured 2 glasses of something amber and expensive. She handed one to Lucas without asking if he wanted it. "You're doing what you need to do. That's not questionable. That's survival. Tell that to my daughter when she figures out where the money actually came from." "She won't." "Why would she?" "Because kids aren't stupid. Because eventually she'll do the math and realize her father's sudden financial turnaround coincided with him disappearing every night." Lucas drank the whiskey, Scotch, probably older than his relationship with Mira. "She asked why I smell different when I come home." Arya went still. "Different how?" "Perfume, soap, whatever expensive products you stock in that bathroom." He laughed without humor. "I'm carrying evidence of our transaction back to my real life." "So, shower before you leave. That's your solution? Better operational security?" "What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry?" "I'm not. We made an agreement that benefits both of us." "Benefits," Lucas repeated. "Right. That's what this is. Beneficial. You got money for your father's surgery. I'm getting what I need. That's the literal definition of mutually beneficial. And the rest of it? The dinners, the conversations, the fact that you know more about my life now than most people I've known for years? That's just being civil. It doesn't change what this is." "Then what is this, Arya? Because from where I'm sitting, it stopped being a simple transaction about 3 weeks ago." She set down her glass with controlled precision. "Don't do this." "Do what?" "Pretend this is something it's not. Pretend we're building towards something beyond the contract terms." "I'm not pretending anything. I'm acknowledging that human beings can't operate in a vacuum. That spending 3 hours together 5 nights a week creates familiarity, whether we want it to or not." "I don't want it." But her voice shook slightly, just enough to betray the lie. Lucas stood, closing the distance between them. "Then why do you keep feeding me? Why do you ask about my father? Why do you care if my daughter is okay?" "I don't. You're a terrible liar, and you're reading too much into basic courtesy." "Courtesy," Lucas laughed. "Is that what we're calling it?" Arya's composure cracked, anger flashing through. "What do you want from me? An admission that I've started looking forward to you arriving? That the 3 hours you're here feel less empty than the other 21? That sometimes I catch myself thinking about you during board meetings when I should be focused on quarterly projections?" The admission hung between them, raw and unexpected. "That sounds like more than courtesy," Lucas said quietly. "It's a mistake. Mistakes happen. That doesn't mean we act on them." She stepped back, rebuilding her walls in real time. "We have a contract. We fulfill the terms. Everything else is just noise." "People aren't noise, Arya. They are when they complicate things that should be simple. Nothing about this is simple. It never was." They stood there, 3 feet apart, the space between them charged with everything they weren't saying, everything the contract explicitly forbade. Finally, Arya moved toward the bedroom. "Are we doing this or not? I'm ovulating. The timing matters." The clinical terminology after emotional honesty felt like whiplash. Lucas followed because the contract said he should, but something had shifted. The mechanics were the same, but the context was different, heavier, like they were both aware they were pretending while simultaneously unable to stop. Afterward, Arya didn't immediately flee to the bathroom. She stayed, her breathing evening out, her body still beside his in the dark. "My father used to say emotion was a luxury we couldn't afford," she said into the silence. "That feelings made you weak, exploitable. That the only way to survive was to control everything, including yourself. Your father sounds like he died lonely. He died successful. There's a difference." "Is there?" Lucas turned his head on the pillow, breaking the no eye contact rule. Are you successful, Arya? Really? Or are you just following someone else's blueprint for what success should look like? I have everything I need, except anything you actually want. Her jaw tightened. You don't know what I want. I know you're lonely enough to pay someone to show up, to contract for human contact because asking for it voluntarily feels like failure. He wasn't trying to be cruel, just honest. I know, because I'm doing the same thing from the other side. We're not the same. We're exactly the same. We're both terrified of needing people, so we built contracts and boundaries and rules that let us pretend we're in control. Lucas sat up, reaching for his clothes. The difference is, I'm honest about being desperate. You're still pretending you're not. Get out. Her voice was ice. I'm leaving. That's what I do. Remember? Show up, perform, leave before dawn. Very efficient. Lucas, he stopped at the bedroom door. She was sitting up now, the sheet pulled to her chest, looking furious and vulnerable in equal measure. What? He asked. I don't know how to do this differently. This is what I know. Control, contracts, terms and conditions. Then learn something new, or don't. But stop pretending the walls you've built are protection. They're just isolation with better marketing. He left before she could respond, before he could see if his words landed or just bounced off the armor she'd spent years perfecting. The next 3 nights, Lucas arrived to find dinner waiting, but Arya absent. Notes on the counter. Eat if you want, bedroom when ready. The transactions became mechanical again. Efficient. Everything the contract promised. Lucas hated it. On the 4th night, he arrived to darkness. No dinner, no note. Just Arya sitting on the floor by the windows, still in her work clothes, knees pulled to her chest. The board voted, she said without looking at him. They're moving forward with the acquisition talks. I'm being outvoted in my own company. Lucas set down his keys, moved to sit beside her on the absurdly expensive floor. Can they do that? Technically, yes. I'm majority shareholder, but not absolute. If enough board members align, they can force the sale. Her voice was flat, empty. My father built this company from nothing, and I'm losing it to men who think a 26-year-old woman can't possibly know what she's doing. What are you going to do? I don't know. Fight, probably. Lose anyway. Wonder why I thought I could be different. She finally looked at him. Wonder why I thought controlling everything would keep me safe. Arya? You were right. About the walls, about the isolation, about all of it. She laughed, bitter. Congratulations. You win the most accurate psychological assessment award. That's not what I wanted. What did you want? Lucas didn't have a good answer. Or rather, he had an answer that violated every clause of their agreement. So he did something that definitely violated the contract. He reached over and took her hand. She stiffened. We don't touch. Outside of contractual obligations. Sue me. Add it to the bill. Her hand was cold in his. Small. Nothing like the corporate warrior who'd presented him with a 30-page contract and demanded biological services like ordering office supplies. I'm tired, Arya said quietly. I'm so tired of fighting alone. Then stop fighting alone. I don't know how. Everyone wants something. You want money. The board wants control. My father wanted legacy. Everyone has an agenda. What do you want? The question seemed to break something in her. I want to matter, to be seen as more than my father's disappointing daughter, to build something that's mine, not just inherited. Her voice cracked. I want to stop being so fucking lonely I had to contract for human company because asking for it felt like admitting failure. Lucas's chest tightened. You're not a failure. I'm paying you to be here. That's pretty much the definition. No, you're paying me for a specific service. I'm here right now because you're falling apart, and I'm apparently constitutionally incapable of walking away when someone's hurting. That's not in the contract. A lot of things aren't in the contract anymore. They sat there on the floor, hands linked, watching the city lights blur and shift beyond the windows. Somewhere around midnight, Arya's head dipped to rest on his shoulder. Lucas didn't move, didn't mention it, just let her be tired and human and not in control for once. At 12:47 a.m., she stirred. We didn't fulfill tonight's obligations. No, we didn't. The statistics will be fine. We have 11 months left. Missing one night won't destroy anything. Arya sat up, looking at him with those gray eyes that were less guarded than he'd ever seen them. Why are you being kind to me? Because you're a person having a bad day, and kindness doesn't cost extra. Everything costs extra in my experience. Then your experience is limited. Lucas stood, offered his hand. Come on, you need sleep more than you need to maintain contractual precision. She let him pull her up. Stood there, uncertain, like someone who'd forgotten how to accept help without calculating the debt. Will you stay? She asked. Just for tonight. Not for the contract. Just stay. Every alarm bell in Lucas's head went off. This was how attachments formed, how professional arrangements became personal, how people got hurt when reality inevitably reasserted itself. Yeah, he said anyway, I'll stay. They lay in the dark, not touching beyond occupying the same space. Arya fell asleep first, her breathing evening out, her body finally relaxing in a way Lucas had never witnessed during their contracted encounters. Lucas stared at the ceiling, feeling the familiar weight of bad decisions settling in his chest. This was supposed to be simple. Show up, perform, leave. Don't get involved. Don't care. Don't let the loneliness of someone else become permission to address your own. But Sophie had asked why he smelled different when he came home, and Arya had asked him to stay, and somewhere in the space between transaction and connection, Lucas had stopped being able to tell which role he was playing anymore. His phone buzzed silently. A text from Mrs. Chen. Sophie had a nightmare. Asking for you. Called you twice. You okay? Lucas looked at the message, then at Arya sleeping beside him, then at the clock showing 2:34 a.m., well past when he should have left. He stayed anyway. And that, more than any contract clause or dollar amount, felt like the real point of no return. The coffee shop 3 blocks from Meridian Tower became Lucas's second office over the next 2 weeks. He'd sit with his laptop open to design projects he couldn't focus on, his phone face up on the table, waiting for texts that came at irregular intervals like Morse code from someone learning a new language. Arya, 11:47 a.m. Board member approached me in the parking garage, said I should reconsider my position before I embarrass myself further. Very subtle. Lucas. Translation. You scared them and they're scrambling. Arya, 11:52 a.m. Or I'm delusional and about to lose everything. Lucas. You're not delusional. You're just surrounded by people invested in your failure. Arya, 11:58 a.m. That's a depressing way to describe corporate leadership, Lucas. You asked for honesty, not optimism. The texts were brief, clinical, nothing like the conversations they'd had over Thai food and exhaustion. But they were something. Proof that Arya was still thinking about him outside their contracted hours. Proof that maybe the walls she'd rebuilt weren't as solid as she pretended. Sophie's suspension ended, and she returned to school with a warning about conflict resolution and a smug satisfaction that the kid she'd punched now avoided her in the hallway. Lucas tried to explain that violence wasn't the answer, while secretly being a little proud that his daughter knew how to stand up for herself. Mrs. Martinez wants to meet with you, Sophie announced over dinner, spaghetti from a box, because Lucas's culinary ambitions had limits. She says we need to discuss my behavioral patterns. What did you do now? Nothing. I've been perfect. But she says punching Tommy means I have unresolved anger and need to talk about my feelings. Sophie twirled pasta with the dramatic flair of someone deeply offended. I don't have unresolved anger. I had very resolved anger. I resolved it with my fist. That's not how resolution works. It worked fine. Tommy stopped saying mean things. Lucas rubbed his temples, feeling the familiar exhaustion of single parenting while trying to maintain some moral authority. We'll talk to Mrs. Martinez, and you'll apologize for hitting, even if Tommy was being cruel. That's not fair. Life's not fair. Get used to it. Sophie glared at him with an expression that looked disturbingly like Mira on a bad day. You're grumpy. Is it because of your weird colleague? I'm not grumpy. You're totally grumpy. And you smell like her perfume again, and you keep checking your phone like it's going to explode. Lucas set down his fork, studying his 7-year-old who apparently had the observational skills of a detective. The colleague and I are figuring some things out. It's complicated. Everything's complicated with grown-ups. Why can't you just like her or not like her? Because I already like her. That's not the complicated part. Then what is? How did he explain to a child that he'd sold himself to pay for her grandfather's surgery? That the woman he was falling for had bought him like a service? That their entire relationship was built on desperation and contracts and the kind of moral compromise that would horrify anyone who knew the truth? She's scared of needing people, Lucas said finally, and I'm scared of needing her. So we're both trying to figure out how to be brave enough to try anyway. Sophie considered this with the seriousness of someone far older than 7. Mom said you were always scared, even when you pretended you weren't. Your mom said that? When I asked why you and her got divorced, she said you were scared of failing, so you worked all the time instead of being home. And then you failed anyway because that's what happens when you're scared. The accuracy hurt. Lucas had spent his marriage terrified of inadequacy, throwing himself into work to prove he mattered, and in the process proving to Mira that she didn't matter enough. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was repeating the same pattern with Arya, just with different stakes. Your mom was right, Lucas admitted. I was scared. I still am, honestly. But you're trying anyway? With the weird colleague? I'm trying. Good. Being scared but trying is better than being scared and hiding. Sophie returned to her spaghetti, the philosophical moment apparently concluded. Also, can we get a real Christmas tree this year? The plastic one is depressing. We'll see. We'll see means no. We'll see means I don't know yet. Money's better, but not unlimited. Because of the weird colleague's money? Lucas's chest tightened. What? You said you got a big client. That's why Grandpa could have surgery. Was the client her? The lie sat on Lucas's tongue, ready to deploy. But Sophie was looking at him with those eyes that had learned to read adult evasions, and he was suddenly tired of lying to the one person who deserved his honesty. Yeah, he said quietly. The client was her. Is she nice, as a client? She's fair. Very clear about expectations. Do you like working for her? It's complicated. You keep saying that. Complicated is just another word for I don't want to explain. You're too smart for 7. I know. It's exhausting. That night at 10:14 p.m., Lucas arrived at the penthouse to find Arya standing at the windows on her phone, speaking low and intense to someone who was clearly losing an argument. She ended the call when she saw him, her expression unreadable. Lawyer, she said by way of explanation. Trying to find loopholes in the board's voting structure. Turns out there aren't many. Any progress? Define progress. I'm hemorrhaging money on legal fees while 12 men wait for me to accept defeat gracefully. She moved to the bar, poured something amber that probably cost more than Lucas's car payment. Want one? I'm good? Right, you don't really drink, I forgot. I drink, just not when I'm about to. Lucas gestured vaguely toward the bedroom. Perform your contractual obligations. Arya's smile was sharp. You can say it. We're both adults participating in a business arrangement. Is that what we're doing? Still? What else would we be doing? Lucas thought about the texts, the scrambled eggs, the night she'd asked him to stay, and he had, breaking every rule they'd established. I don't know, something else. Something that doesn't fit in 30 pages of legal terminology. Arya drank her expensive whiskey, studying him over the rim of the glass. Do you regret it? Signing the contract? That's a complicated question. Everything's complicated with us. Answer anyway. Lucas considered lying, but Sophie's voice echoed in his head. Being scared but trying is better than being scared and hiding. I regret that I needed to. I regret that my father's life had a price tag I could only meet by selling myself. I regret that desperation made me capable of things I never thought I'd do. But I don't regret meeting you, even like this, even backwards and wrong and built on the worst possible foundation. He moved closer, watching her shoulders tense. I don't regret that somewhere in this mess, I started actually caring what happens to you. That's against the contract terms. I know, sue me for breach, add it to the bill. Arya set down her glass with careful precision. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Good. It should be hard. People shouldn't be easy to walk away from. I'm not people. I'm a woman who paid you to get her pregnant so she could fulfill a trust fund requirement and prove to dead father that she's capable of something. You're a person who's terrified of being vulnerable. The trust fund is just an excuse. The baby is just a justification. You could have gone to a sperm bank if it was really just biology. Sperm banks don't come to your penthouse. They don't make you feel less alone for 3 hours a night. The admission hung between them, honest and devastating. So that's what this is? Lucas asked. Expensive companionship with a biological bonus? I don't know what this is. That's the problem. Arya crossed her arms, defensive. I know what it was supposed to be. Clinical, controlled, purely transactional. But then you made scrambled eggs and asked about my day and stayed when I fell apart. And now I don't know how to go back to pretending you're just a service I contracted for. Then don't go back. Move forward instead. Forward to what? A relationship? We met because I was buying biology and you were selling desperation. That's not a foundation. That's a disaster waiting to collapse. Or it's two people who found each other in the wreckage and decided to build something anyway. Arya laughed, bitter and tired. You're an optimist. I'd forgotten those existed. I'm a realist who's choosing hope over cynicism. There's a difference. Hope is just delayed disappointment. Then I guess I'm comfortable being disappointed later instead of miserable now. She stared at him, something shifting behind those gray eyes. The board meeting is in 3 days. If I lose everything. The company my father built. The only proof I have that I'm more than his disappointing daughter. Everything. You won't lose. You can't know that. I know you. I know you're brilliant and stubborn and absolutely unwilling to let mediocre men define your worth. That's enough. What if it's not? What if I fight and lose anyway? Then you fought. That matters. Does it? Really? Or is fighting just another way to delay accepting reality? Lucas closed the distance between them, taking the glass from her hand and setting it aside. You want to know what reality is? Reality is that you scare the hell out of those board members because they can't control you. Reality is that you've tripled the company's value and they're trying to sell it out from under you because admitting you were right means admitting they were wrong. Reality is that you're not your father, and that's exactly why you're going to win. Arya's breath hitched. You have a lot of faith in someone you barely know. I know you better than you think. I know you fight when you're scared instead of running. I know you ask for help even though it terrifies you. I know you're capable of more than you let yourself believe. How do you know that? Because you asked me to stay. Because you made eggs at 2 a.m. for a man you were supposed to treat like a calendar appointment. Because you're standing here right now admitting you're scared instead of pretending you're not. She kissed him then, not the mechanical kisses the contract forbade, but something real, desperate and searching, and completely against every rule she'd established. Lucas kissed her back, feeling the shift from transaction to something neither of them had names for yet. When they broke apart, Arya was crying. Not the controlled tears of someone maintaining composure, but the messy, overwhelming kind that came from months of holding everything in. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. How to want someone without calculating the cost. How to need someone without resenting them for the vulnerability. Then we figure it out together. No calculations, no contracts, just two people trying. That's terrifying. Yeah, most good things are. They stood there in her penthouse that had witnessed months of careful transactions, holding each other while the city moved through its nighttime rhythms below. Eventually, Arya pulled back, wiping her face with the back of her hand. We should probably fulfill the contract obligations, she said, attempting normalcy. Probably. But I don't want to. Not tonight. Not like this. Then we don't. The contract can survive one missed night. The statistics will be fine. We have time. Arya nodded, relief crossing her face. Will you stay anyway? Like before? Not for the contract. Just stay. Lucas thought about Sophie at home with Mrs. Chen, about the texts he'd have to explain in the morning, about all the complications that came with choosing this over the clean simplicity of walking away. Yeah, he said, I'll stay. They lay in the dark together, not touching beyond existing in the same space. Arya fell asleep first, her breathing evening out, her body finally relaxing in a way Lucas had never witnessed during their contracted encounters. Lucas stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight of a decision he had already made but hadn't acknowledged yet. This wasn't about money anymore. Wasn't about his father's surgery or Sophie's stability or any of the practical reasons he'd signed that contract. This was about Arya, about wanting her beyond obligation, about choosing to fall for someone who'd bought him because neither of them knew how to ask for connection any other way. His phone buzzed silently. Mrs. Chen. Sophie's fine. Sleeping. Take your time. Another text, this one from his father. Saw the doctor today. Recovery's ahead of schedule. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Thank you, son. Lucas turned off his phone and pulled Arya closer, feeling her shift unconsciously toward him, seeking warmth even in sleep. Outside, the city lights painted patterns across expensive furniture that was slowly becoming familiar. This was wrong in about 15 different ways, built on desperation and contracts and moral compromises that would horrify anyone who knew the truth. But it was also real in a way nothing else in Lucas's carefully constructed survival strategy had been, and that had to count for something. The morning came with coffee Arya made while Lucas was in the shower, with her wearing an oversized sweater and looking uncertain. With both of them navigating domestic territory neither had mapped yet. I have a confession, Arya said, sliding the coffee across the counter. Should I be worried? I like this. You being here in the morning, the penthouse feeling less empty. All of it. She wrapped her hands around her own mug. That terrifies me more than the board meeting. Because the board I can fight. I know those rules, but this, you, us, I don't know how to fight for something without destroying it in the process. Then don't fight. Just be. Let it exist without controlling every variable. I don't know how to do that. Then learn. With me. We'll both learn. Arya smiled, small, uncertain, but genuine. You're very optimistic for someone who sells design services to people who say things like, make it pop. Someone has to balance your cynicism. Might as well be me. They drank coffee together while morning light filtered through windows that overlooked a city waking up. Arya checked her phone compulsively, reading emails from lawyers and board members and people positioning themselves for whatever came next. I should go, Lucas said finally. Sophie will be wondering where I am. Will you tell her? About this? About us? Eventually. When I figure out what this and us actually means. Fair enough. Arya walked him to the elevator, a gesture she'd never done before. At the doors, she caught his hand. Lucas? Thank you. For staying. For not running when I gave you every reason to. Thank you for asking me to stay. For letting me see you as more than the corporate warrior who offered me a contract. The elevator came. Lucas stepped in, and for the first time, leaving felt wrong instead of necessary. That afternoon, Lucas sat in Mrs. Martinez's office while Sophie fidgeted in the chair beside him. The guidance counselor had kind eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who'd seen every childhood crisis imaginable. Sophie's a bright girl, Mrs. Martinez said, but she's showing signs of stress, acting out physically, difficulty concentrating, emotional volatility. These are all indicators that something at home might be affecting her. Things have been complicated, Lucas admitted. Her grandfather was very sick, required surgery. That created financial stress that Sophie definitely picked up on. And how is her grandfather now? Recovering well, better than expected. That's wonderful. Mrs. Martinez made a note. And the financial stress? Has that eased? Lucas thought about the check that had saved his father's life, about the woman who'd written it, about the price he'd paid that Sophie could never know about. It's improving. We're stabilizing. Good. Stability is essential for children Sophie's age. They need to know their foundation is secure. She turned to Sophie. And what about you? How are you feeling about everything? Sophie shrugged, kicking her legs. Fine, I guess. Your teacher says you've been quieter lately, less engaged in class activities. School's boring. Or something's distracting you, something you're worried about. Sophie looked at Lucas, then back to Mrs. Martinez. I worry about Daddy sometimes. He seems sad even when he says he's not. And he comes home late a lot now, and he smells different. Lucas's stomach dropped. Sophie? It's okay, Mrs. Martinez interjected gently. Sophie, when you say your dad smells different, what do you mean? Like fancy soap, and perfume like he's been somewhere expensive. Sophie's voice was small. Is Daddy seeing someone? Like dating? The question hung there, impossible to answer honestly without revealing everything. I've been working with a new client, Lucas said carefully. Someone who lives in a very different world than we do. Sometimes I have meetings at her place, and yeah, it smells different there. Fancier. Her, Sophie repeated. So it's a lady. Yes, it's a lady. Are you dating her? Lucas met his daughter's eyes, seeing the fear and hope mixed in equal measure. It's complicated. We're figuring things out. Does she make you happy? Sometimes. She also makes me frustrated and confused and scared. But yeah, sometimes she makes me happy. Sophie seemed to process this, her expression serious beyond her years. Okay, that's okay. As long as you're trying to be happy instead of just pretending. Mrs. Martinez smiled. That's very wise, Sophie. Your dad is lucky to have you. After the meeting, Lucas took Sophie for ice cream because apparently all major emotional conversations in his life happened over frozen dairy products. Sophie got mint chip and lectured him about honesty while chocolate stained her chin. You should tell me about her, Sophie said. The lady client. I'm old enough to know things. What do you want to know? Is she nice? Lucas considered the question. She's complicated. She's brilliant and scared, and sometimes says things that hurt without meaning to. But yeah, I think underneath everything, she's nice. Does she like you? I think so. She's not good at showing it, but I think so. Are you going to marry her? Sophie, Mom has a boyfriend now. His name is Derek and he's boring, but whatever. You should have someone too, someone who's not boring. Lucas felt something shift in his chest. You'd be okay with that? Me dating someone? As long as she's not mean to you, and as long as I'm still important. Sophie fixed him with a serious look. I'm still the most important, right? Always. Nothing changes that. Good. Then you can date the fancy lady if you want. Just tell me about her so I don't have to guess. That night at 10:08 p.m., Lucas arrived at the penthouse with a decision made. Arya was surrounded by papers, laptop open, her hair escaping its professional arrangement in a way that made her look younger and more overwhelmed. The meeting's tomorrow, she said without preamble. I'm not ready. I'll never be ready. You're as ready as you can be. The rest is just showing up and refusing to back down. Easy for you to say. You're not about to lose everything you've worked for. Lucas sat beside her, looking at the evidence of her preparation, charts, documentation, legal precedents. Sophie asked me today if I'm dating you. Arya went very still. What did you tell her? That it's complicated, that we're figuring things out. He turned to face her. But I want to tell her yes. I want to tell her that the fancy lady I work for is actually someone I'm falling in love with. Someone who's terrifying and brilliant and makes me want to be braver than I think I can be. Lucas, I know the timing is terrible. I know you have the board meeting tomorrow and don't need emotional complications, but I also know that life doesn't wait for perfect timing. And if I don't say this now, I might lose the courage. Say what? That I love you. That somewhere between transaction 37 and tonight, I fell completely in love with you. That I don't want this to be about contracts anymore. I want it to be about choice. About choosing you and having you choose me back. Arya's eyes filled with tears. You can't love me. You barely know me. I know you well enough. I know you're fighting for a company that matters more than money. I know you're terrified of disappointing a dead father who already disappointed you. I know you're brave enough to ask for help even though it scares you. That's enough. What if I lose tomorrow? What if everything falls apart? Then we deal with it together. You don't have to fight alone anymore. She kissed him then, desperate and searching and completely honest. When they broke apart, Arya was crying in earnest. I love you too, she whispered. I don't know when it happened or how, but I love you, and that terrifies me more than anything the board could do. Why? Because they can only take my company. You could take everything. Lucas pulled her close, feeling her shake against him. Then I guess we're both terrified. We can be terrified together. They stayed up late, reviewing her presentation one more time, Lucas offering suggestions from a designer's perspective that made complex information visually undeniable. Around 2 a.m., Arya finally closed her laptop, exhaustion winning over anxiety. Will you come tomorrow to the meeting? If you want me there. I want you there. Even if you can't be in the room, I want to know you're nearby, that I'm not doing this alone. Then I'll be there. Coffee shop 3 blocks away, on standby. They went to bed together, not for contractual obligations, but because neither wanted to be alone. In the dark, Arya's voice came quiet and uncertain. What happens after tomorrow? Regardless of how it goes? We keep figuring this out, keep choosing each other, keep being terrified but trying anyway. That's not very specific. Nothing about us is specific. We're making this up as we go. I hate making things up as I go. I know. That's why you have me. I'm excellent at improvisation. She laughed softly, the sound genuine despite the fear. We're going to screw this up so badly. Probably. But we'll screw it up together. That has to count for something. Arya turned in the darkness, finding his hand. Thank you. For staying. For loving me even though I'm a disaster. For making scrambled eggs and asking about my day and refusing to let me push you away. Thank you for letting me in. For being brave enough to ask for help. For choosing me even when it scared you. They fell asleep like that, hands linked. Two people who'd met wrong and loved wrong and were building something real from the wreckage of their careful defenses. And in the morning, when Lucas woke to find Arya already dressed for battle, suit armor in place, hair severe, expression controlled, he understood that this was how she fought, by becoming the person they expected to see, then dismantling their assumptions from the inside. You're going to be amazing, he said. I'm going to try not to vomit from nerves. That's basically the same thing. She kissed him goodbye at the door, a quick press of lips that promised more later, after the battle, when they could both breathe again. I love you, she said. I love you too. Now go prove them all wrong. That's the plan. The elevator doors closed on her determined expression, and Lucas stood in the penthouse that had witnessed their transformation from transaction to something real, feeling the weight of everything about to change. Win or lose, after today, nothing would be the same. The board would vote, Arya would fight, and Lucas would wait 3 blocks away, ready to celebrate her victory or catch her if she fell. Because that's what love looked like when you did it backwards, showing up, staying present, and choosing each other even when the foundation was built on desperation and contracts and all the wrong reasons that somehow led to exactly the right place. The coffee tasted different when someone else made it for you. Lucas discovered this at 6:47 a.m., sitting in Arya's kitchen wearing yesterday's clothes, watching her move around the space with the careful uncertainty of someone navigating unfamiliar domestic territory. I don't know how you take it, she said, setting the mug in front of him. I made it like mine, black with 1 sugar. That's fine. Lucas wrapped his hands around the warmth, acutely aware that he'd violated multiple contract terms by staying past dawn. You didn't have to do this. I know. I wanted to. She sat across from him, her own mug cradled between her palms. Her hair was loose, falling around her shoulders in a way he'd never seen. No suit, just an oversized sweater and the kind of vulnerability that came with morning light. Thank you. For last night. For staying. You don't need to thank me for basic human decency. In my experience, very little about human behavior is basic or decent. She took a sip of coffee, studying him over the rim. Your daughter called. I heard your phone buzzing. Yeah, I saw the messages. You should go. She needs you. Lucas should go. Should have gone hours ago. Should never have stayed in the first place. But sitting here drinking coffee with a woman who'd spent months treating him like a scheduled appointment felt like the first honest thing that had happened between them since he'd signed his name to that contract. What happens now? He asked. What do you mean? With us. With this. We crossed about 15 different boundaries last night. Arya set down her mug with careful precision. Nothing has to change. We can go back to the arrangement. Pretend last night was an anomaly. Can we? Really? People compartmentalize all the time. It's a survival skill. It's also a recipe for going insane. Lucas leaned back in his chair. I can't keep showing up here and pretending you're just a contract. Not anymore. Fear flickered across her face, real fear, the kind that came from someone considering letting their guard down after years of keeping it raised. Then what do you suggest? I don't know. Maybe we stop pretending this is only about biology. Maybe we acknowledge that somewhere between Transaction 37 and last night, this became something else. Something else like what? Like two lonely people who found each other in the most backwards way possible and accidentally started giving a damn. Arya stood abruptly, moving to the window. The morning sun caught the outline of her body through the thin sweater, and Lucas looked away because some lines still felt wrong to cross, even now. I don't know how to do relationships, she said to the glass. I know how to do business, contracts, clear terms, and measurable outcomes. Relationships don't work like that. Exactly, which is why I avoid them. She turned back to face him. What you're suggesting, caring, attachment, whatever you want to call it, that's not what I signed up for. Neither did I, but here we are anyway. Here we are. She crossed her arms, defensive. And what happens when this falls apart? When you realize I'm too controlling or cold or damaged? When I inevitably disappoint you because I don't know how to be what people need? What happens when it doesn't fall apart? Lucas countered. What if we're both so convinced we'll fail that we sabotage something before it even starts? That's a risk I've calculated. The sabotage is intentional. Safer. Safer isn't the same as better. They stared at each other across the expensive kitchen, two people terrified of the same thing for different reasons. I need to think, Arya said finally, about what I want, what I'm capable of, what this could even look like outside of contract terms. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. Lucas stood, fishing his keys from his pocket. Well, actually, I'm going home to my daughter who thinks I'm having a midlife crisis. But metaphorically, I'm not going anywhere. Lucas. She caught his arm as he passed, her fingers tentative against his sleeve. I'm scared. Yeah, me too. What if I'm too broken for this? What if you're not? What if broken is just another word for human, and humans are what we've been pretending not to be this whole time? He left before she could answer, before the morning could stretch into something neither of them knew how to navigate. The elevator descent felt longer than usual, 47 floors of reality reasserting itself with each passing floor number. Sophie was eating cereal when Lucas got home, her rabbit propped in the chair beside her. Mrs. Chen had let herself in with the spare key, making coffee and shooting Lucas a look that said everything her polite silence didn't. Rough night? Mrs. Chen asked, which was her diplomatic way of asking what the hell he'd been doing. Work ran late, phone died. I crashed at a colleague's place rather than drive exhausted. The lies came easier now. That should have worried him more than it did. Mrs. Chen nodded, unconvinced but too kind to push. Sophie was upset. Bad dreams about her grandfather. Lucas moved to his daughter, pulling her into a hug that probably lasted too long. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence, and he felt the weight of his double life settle heavier on his shoulders. I'm sorry, baby. I should have been here. Where were you really? Sophie asked, her 7-year-old bullshit detector finely tuned. Working. I told you, big project. You smell like fancy soap again. And perfume. Does your colleague wear perfume? Lucas closed his eyes. Yeah, she does. Is she nice? She's complicated. That's a weird answer. She's a weird person. Sophie considered this, eating another spoonful of cereal with the serious contemplation of a child trying to understand adult inconsistencies. Do you like her? The question landed harder than it should have. I don't know yet. But you might? Maybe. Is that okay? Sophie shrugged, a gesture too adult for her small frame. Mom has a boyfriend now. His name is Derek, and he has a boat. He's boring, but he makes her happy, I guess. She looked up at Lucas with eyes that had learned too early to read between lines. You should be happy too, Daddy, even if she's weird. Lucas felt something crack in his chest. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just don't listen when you're worried about grown-up stuff. After Mrs. Chen left, and Sophie went to watch cartoons, Lucas stood in his bathroom, staring at his reflection. He looked tired, older than 32, like a man living 2 lives and failing at both. His phone buzzed. Arya, I'm meeting with lawyers today about the acquisition. The board moves fast when they sense weakness. Lucas, you're not weak. Arya, tell that to 12 men who've been waiting for me to fail since my father died. Lucas, want company? Moral support has no contractual implications. The three dots appeared and disappeared multiple times before her response came through. You'd do that? Lucas. I'll bring coffee. The real stuff, not whatever corporate sludge they serve at law firms. Arya, 2 p.m. Morrison and Associates on 5th. Don't be late. He wasn't late. Lucas arrived at 1:53 p.m. with 2 cups of the expensive coffee from the place near Meridian Tower, the kind that cost $8 and tasted like someone gave a damn about the beans. The law firm occupied 3 floors of a building that screamed old money and inherited privilege. The receptionist looked at Lucas like he'd wandered in from the wrong tax bracket. I'm here for Arya Vale's meeting. The receptionist's eyebrows climbed. Are you expected? Ask her. 2 minutes later, Arya appeared in the lobby, still in her corporate armor, tailored suit, hair severe, expression controlled. But her eyes softened when she saw him, just fractionally, just enough. You came, she said. I said I would. He handed her the coffee. Black, 1 sugar, like we discussed. She took it, her fingers brushing his for a moment longer than necessary. You didn't have to do this. I know, that's why I did. The meeting room was everything Lucas expected. Massive table, leather chairs, windows overlooking the city like a reminder of how far you could fall. 3 lawyers sat on one side, all men in their 50s, all wearing the smug confidence of people who'd never lost. Ms. Vale, the lead lawyer said, standing with the kind of courtesy that felt like condescension. We weren't expecting guests. This is Lucas Reed. He's here as my advisor. Your advisor? The lawyer's tone suggested he found this amusing. In what capacity? Personal. Arya sat, gesturing for Lucas to take the chair beside her. Shall we proceed? Lucas had no business being in this room, no understanding of corporate law or acquisition terms or whatever the hell these people were about to discuss. But he understood power dynamics, and he understood that Arya sitting alone against 3 lawyers would look like exactly what her board wanted, a young woman overwhelmed and outmatched. The lawyers laid out their case with the efficiency of surgeons. The board had votes. The acquisition offer was generous. Fighting would be expensive, time-consuming, and ultimately futile. Arya could accept gracefully and maintain some dignity, or she could resist and lose everything, including her reputation. This is leverage disguised as advice, Lucas said, surprising himself. The lawyers turned to him with identical expressions of who the hell asked you. Excuse me? The lead lawyer said. You're presenting this as inevitable, as if Ms. Vale's only choice is capitulation or destruction. Lucas leaned forward slightly. But that's only true if she's alone, if she has resources you haven't accounted for, support you're not expecting. And what resources would those be, Mr. Reed? Me, for starters, and anyone else who's tired of watching competent women get talked out of their own companies by men who think age and gender determine capacity. Arya's hand found his under the table, squeezing once. A thank you compressed into pressure. The lead lawyer's smile was patronizing. That's very noble, but nobility doesn't change voting realities. Ms. Vale's position is untenable. My position, Arya said, her voice cutting through the condescension like steel, is majority shareholder. My father built this company on calculated risks, on seeing potential where others saw obstacles, on refusing to accept limitations other people tried to impose. Your father also knew when to accept reality. My father died thinking I'd failed at being the daughter he wanted, but I succeeded at being the CEO this company needs. She stood, and Lucas stood with her. You can tell the board I'm not accepting their offer. Tell them I'm prepared to fight. Tell them they underestimated me, and that's going to cost them more than they calculated. Ms. Vale, I strongly advise, I don't pay you for advice. I pay you for legal representation. Either do your job or I'll find lawyers who will. They left the conference room with the kind of dramatic exit that probably violated professional courtesy, but felt absolutely right. In the elevator, Arya started laughing, real laughter, the kind that came from equal parts relief and disbelief. I can't believe I just did that. You were amazing. I was probably stupid. They're right about the voting realities. Maybe, but you didn't fold. That counts for something. Arya looked at him, really looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. Why did you do that back there? You had no obligation to defend me. Because watching people underestimate you pisses me off. Because you're brilliant and capable, and the only person who can't see it is you. Lucas held her gaze. Because somewhere between contract and reality, I started actually caring what happens to you. The elevator reached the lobby. Neither of them moved to leave. I think I'm falling for you, Arya said quietly. I don't know how it happened or when it started, but I wake up thinking about you and I fall asleep replaying conversations, and I keep making excuses to extend your time here because 3 hours isn't enough anymore. Lucas's heart kicked against his ribs. That terrifies you. Absolutely. Good, because it terrifies me too. What do we do about it? I have no idea. Start dating like normal people? Except we've already skipped about 15 steps and done everything backwards. I don't know how to date. I know how to negotiate and strategize and control variables. People aren't variables. I know, that's the problem. They stood in the elevator, suspended between floors and decisions, neither willing to make the first move toward something neither knew how to navigate. Lucas's phone rang, his father's number. He answered immediately. Dad? Lucas. His father's voice was stronger than it had been in months. I'm being discharged. Thursday. Doctors say the recovery is ahead of schedule. Relief flooded through Lucas so intensely he had to lean against the elevator wall. That's amazing. That's incredible. It's because of you. Whatever you did to get that money, don't. We're not discussing it. I know, son. I know. A pause. But thank you for giving me more time, for fighting when I couldn't. After he hung up, Lucas realized Arya had been listening to the entire conversation. Her expression was unreadable. Your father's recovering, she said. Yeah, because of the money you gave me. Because of the contract we both agreed to. Arya and... I'm glad, Lucas. Genuinely. That's what this was supposed to accomplish, saving your father, solving your financial crisis. She stepped out of the elevator into the lobby. Maybe now you can stop hating yourself for what you did to make it happen. I don't hate myself for saving my father. I hate that I'm starting to need you more than I need the money, and I don't know what to do with that. She stopped walking, turning to face him in the middle of the expensive lobby with its marble floors and indifferent security guards. You don't owe me anything beyond the contract. What if I want to owe you more? What if I want this to be about more than obligation and transaction? Then you're setting yourself up for disappointment because I don't know how to be what you're asking for. I'm not asking you to be anything. I'm just asking you to try. Arya's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her expression shifting. The board is calling an emergency meeting. Tonight. They're accelerating the timeline. Because you refused the acquisition. Because I showed spine and they need to squash it before it spreads. She looked at Lucas with those gray eyes that had learned to hide everything important. I need to prepare. War room strategy, legal documentation, everything I do best when I'm alone. You don't have to be alone. Yes, I do. That's how I win. Alone, focused, controlled. Or maybe that's how you lose everything that matters while pretending victory is the same as happiness. The words landed between them like stones. Arya's jaw tightened, her walls reconstructing themselves in real time. Go home to your daughter, Lucas. Be the father she needs. That's what the money was for. Don't complicate it with whatever this is becoming. It's already complicated. Has been since you made scrambled eggs and asked me about my day. That was a mistake. Was last night a mistake? This morning? The coffee I brought you? All of it? Maybe. Probably. I don't know. She stepped back, creating physical distance to match the emotional retreat. I have a company to save. You have a life to rebuild. Let's not confuse contractual obligations with something neither of us is equipped to handle. She walked away before Lucas could respond, her heels clicking against marble with the precise rhythm of someone who'd learned to walk alone and called it strength. Lucas stood in the lobby, holding an empty coffee cup, feeling the familiar weight of something good slipping away before it had the chance to become real. His phone buzzed. Sophie, texting from Mrs. Chen's number. Grandpa called. Says he's coming home Thursday. Can we make his favorite dinner? Real life pulling him back to responsibilities that existed before Area Vale offered him money for biology and accidentally made him care about more than survival. That night at 10:03 p.m., Lucas used the keycard more from habit than expectation. The elevator opened to a penthouse transformed into a war room, papers everywhere, laptop screens glowing. Arya standing at the windows on her phone speaking rapid Mandarin to someone who was clearly not keeping up. She ended the call when she saw him, surprise flickering across her exhausted features. "I told you to go home." "You did? I didn't listen. Turns out I'm bad at following instructions I don't agree with." Lucas surveyed the chaos. "Have you eaten?" "I don't have time for food." "That's not a no." He moved to the kitchen, finding the takeout menus she kept in a drawer. "Thai or Italian?" "Lucas, I'm serious. I have 4 hours to build a counter strategy that convinces 12 men not to sell my company out from under me." "Then you definitely need food. Can't wage war on an empty stomach. Ask any general." "I'm not a general. I'm an overpromoted 26-year-old about to learn what failure tastes like." Lucas ordered Thai without asking, then started clearing space at the dining table. Arya watched him with an expression caught between frustration and something that might have been gratitude. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because you tried to push me away this afternoon, and I'm calling your bluff." He stacked papers carefully, preserving whatever organizational system she'd created. "Because I think you fight better when you're not alone, even if you've convinced yourself otherwise." "I don't need saving." "Good, because I'm not here to save you. I'm here to keep you company while you save yourself." The food arrived. They ate standing at the counter, reviewing documents between bites. Arya explained the voting structure, the board politics, the weaknesses in the acquisition offer that no one was examining because they were too focused on the price tag. "Here," she said, pointing to a clause buried in page 47 of the acquisition agreement. "They're requiring immediate transition of all intellectual property, including ongoing projects. But 3 of our major developments aren't ready for transfer. Pulling them now would violate our contracts with the innovation teams. So the acquisition creates legal liability." "Exactly. The board hasn't done the due diligence. They're seeing dollar signs without reading the fine print. Can you prove it?" "If I had time to build the documentation. But the meeting's in 3 hours." Lucas looked at the mountain of work still remaining, then at Arya's exhausted face, then at his watch showing 11:47 p.m. "Tell me what you need. I'll help." "You don't know corporate law." "I know how to organize information, how to present data clearly, how to make complex things accessible." He pulled out his laptop, ancient, held together with optimism and duct tape. "I'm a designer. That's literally what I do." They worked through the night, Lucas building presentation boards that made the legal liability visible and undeniable. Arya fed him information. Lucas translated it into graphics that told the story even board members allergic to reading could understand. At 2:34 a.m., Arya's eyes were red-rimmed, her third coffee going cold beside her laptop. "Why are you still here?" she asked, not looking up from her screen. "Because you need help, and I'm available." "That's not sufficient motivation for losing sleep." "Fine. Because watching you fight for something you believe in is the most attractive thing I've ever seen, and I apparently have terrible self-preservation instincts when it comes to brilliant women who don't know how incredible they are." She looked up then, meeting his eyes across the table covered in acquisition documents and cold Thai food. "Lucas, you don't have to say anything. Just let me help. Everything else we can figure out later." At 4:12 a.m., they finished. The presentation was clean, damning, and impossible to ignore. Arya stared at the final slide with an expression Lucas couldn't quite read. "This might actually work," she said quietly. "It will work, because you're right and they're wrong, and sometimes that actually matters." She stood, moving around the table to where Lucas sat. Before he could react, she leaned down and kissed him, soft, quick, breaking about 7 different contract rules. "Thank you," she whispered against his mouth. "You're welcome." "I'm still terrified of whatever this is." "Yeah, me too. But maybe terrified is better than empty." "Maybe," Lucas agreed, pulling her down to sit beside him. "Maybe terrified means we're actually feeling something worth protecting." They sat there in the pre-dawn darkness, surrounded by evidence of a fight neither of them was sure they could win, holding on to each other like people who'd finally found something real in the middle of a transaction that was supposed to mean nothing at all. Arya walked into the boardroom at 9:58 a.m., looking like she'd slept 8 hours instead of 0. Lucas had gone home at 6 to shower and get Sophie to school, promising to check his phone every 5 minutes. Now he sat in a coffee shop 3 blocks away, his ancient laptop open to nothing, his attention completely on his phone, waiting for updates he wasn't sure would come. The first text arrived at 10:47 a.m. They're stalling, asking questions about the IP clauses. Good sign. Lucas, you've got them on defense. Keep pushing. At 11:23 a.m., board member Carson is wavering. He didn't do his homework. Looks like an idiot. Lucas, because he is one. You've got this. At 12:14 p.m., taking a break. They're calling their lawyers. I think we actually have a shot. Lucas wanted to be there, wanted to see Arya dismantle the patronizing confidence of men who'd underestimated her. But she'd been clear, having him in the room would raise questions she wasn't ready to answer, about who he was, about why she trusted him, about what existed between them beyond professional courtesy. So he waited, drinking coffee that tasted like anxiety, refreshing his phone like it would make time move faster. At 2:47 p.m., his phone rang instead of texting. Arya's voice was careful, controlled, giving nothing away. It's done. And? The acquisition is dead. Board voted 8-4 against proceeding. Carson changed his vote once he understood the liability exposure. Brought 3 others with him. Lucas exhaled relief that had been building for hours. You won. We won. Those graphics you made, they were the difference. Made it impossible to ignore the problems. A pause. Thank you. You did the work. I just made it pretty. You did more than that. You showed up when I was ready to fight alone. That mattered. Lucas heard something in her voice, exhaustion, yes, but also something softer, vulnerable in a way that made his chest tight. What happens now? He asked. Now I have a company to actually run, contracts to secure, board members to either win over or replace. She laughed, tired but real. Now I do the impossible part, prove they were wrong to doubt me. They were already wrong, you just made them admit it. I should go. Emergency meetings have emergency follow-ups, but Lucas? Yeah? Come tonight, please. Not for the contract. Just come. He went. The penthouse was dark except for the city lights filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Arya sat on the floor where she'd been the night she'd confessed about losing the company, knees pulled to her chest, looking small despite her victory. You won, Lucas said, sitting beside her. Why do you look like you lost? Because winning means I have to actually do this now. Actually be the CEO they don't want me to be. Actually prove that I'm not just my father's disappointing daughter playing at business. You already proved that today. Today was one battle. They'll keep testing me, keep waiting for me to fail, keep looking for reasons to say I told you so. Then keep proving them wrong. You're good at that. Arya leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture that had become natural somewhere between contract and whatever this was becoming. I'm tired of fighting alone. Then stop. I don't know how. Lucas shifted, turning to face her properly. Here's a radical idea. Let people help. Let people care. Let people in before you've calculated all the risks and determined the exact cost of vulnerability. That's terrifying. Yeah, most worthwhile things are. She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers finding his in the darkness. The contract expires in 8 months. Assuming conception happens within the expected time frame. We haven't exactly been keeping to the strict biological schedule lately. No, we haven't. She looked at him, those gray eyes reflecting city lights and something that might have been hope. What if I don't want it to expire? What if I want to renegotiate terms? What kind of terms? The kind that aren't transactional. The kind that involve actual dates and meeting each other's families and figuring out how 2 broken people build something together without a 30-page legal agreement dictating behavior. Lucas's heart kicked against his ribs. You're asking me to actually date you? Like normal people? We're not normal people. We met under the worst possible circumstances and did everything backwards. But maybe that's okay. Maybe backwards is just another way forward. This is the worst pitch for a relationship I've ever heard. I'm not good at pitches that don't involve PowerPoint and projected earnings. Try anyway. Arya took a breath, her composure cracking to show the uncertainty underneath. I like you, Lucas Reed. I like the way you make scrambled eggs and call me out when I'm being impossible. I like that you see me as more than my father's legacy or the board's problem. I like that you stayed when I tried to push you away because you're stubborn and kind and apparently constitutionally incapable of letting people suffer alone. That's better. Keep going. I'm terrified I'll disappoint you, that I'll be too controlling or emotionally stunted or incapable of the kind of warmth normal relationships require. That you'll wake up one day and realize you traded desperation for a different kind of trap. My turn. She nodded. I like you too. Even when you're impossible, maybe especially then. I like that you're brilliant and fierce and refuse to be what other people expect. I like that you're terrified but trying anyway. I like that you made me feel like something more than a father failing at keeping it together. But I have a 7-year-old daughter who comes first, always, and an ex-wife who'll have questions about where the money came from, and a father recovering from surgery who can't know what I did to pay for it. My life is complicated and messy and nothing like the controlled environments you prefer. I know. And you still want to try this? I still want to try this. Lucas kissed her then, properly, breaking the last major rule the contract had established. No kissing, no intimacy beyond biological necessity, no emotional attachment. They'd violated all of it weeks ago. This was just making it official. So what now? Arya asked when they finally broke apart. How do we do this? I have no idea. Maybe we start with dinner that isn't takeout eaten standing up. Maybe you meet Sophie, who will absolutely judge you based on whether you know anything about stuffed rabbits and ice cream preferences. Maybe we figure out what normal looks like when you've spent months being anything but. That sounds uncomfortable. It will be, but uncomfortable isn't the same as wrong. They sat there on the expensive floor, holding each other like people who'd found something unexpected and were still figuring out whether to trust it. Outside, the city moved through its nighttime routines, indifferent to two people renegotiating the terms of their careful disaster. I should tell you something, Arya said quietly, about the contract, about why I structured it the way I did. You don't have to. I want to. You should know. She pulled back slightly, needing space to say difficult things. After my engagement ended, I was angry. At him, at my father, at every expectation I'd failed to meet. I decided if I couldn't have love, I'd have control. If I couldn't trust emotions, I'd trust contracts. The baby requirement for my father's trust just gave me an excuse to make it transactional. You were protecting yourself. I was being a coward, calling it practical when really I was just scared of being vulnerable again, of letting someone matter enough to hurt me. And now? Now I'm still scared, but you matter anyway. Despite the contract, despite my best efforts to keep this clinical, you matter and Sophie matters, and the idea of losing this before it even really starts terrifies me more than the board ever could. Lucas understood that fear intimately, the vulnerability of caring when you'd learned that caring often meant losing. We take it slow. We figure it out as we go. We promise to be honest when we're scared instead of pretending we're not. I can do honest. Honest is just data without the spin. That's the saddest way to describe emotional availability I've ever heard. I contain multitudes of sadness. You're going to learn all of them. Looking forward to it. Well, 2 weeks later, Lucas brought Sophie to the penthouse for the first time. She'd asked approximately 4,000 questions about the weird colleague who'd been occupying so much of her father's time and attention. Lucas had answered approximately 12 of them honestly. Sophie stood in the middle of Arya's living room, her rabbit clutched tight, her eyes wide as she took in the floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that cost more than most people's cars. You're really rich, Sophie said, because 7-year-olds hadn't learned diplomatic phrasing yet. Arya, who'd changed outfits 3 times before they arrived, looked absolutely terrified. I'm comfortable, yes. Do you have a pool? No, just the building has one. That's okay. Daddy can't swim anyway. Sophie moved to the windows, pressing her face against the glass. You can see everything from up here, like being a giant. I suppose so. Sophie turned, studying Arya with the intense scrutiny of a child determining whether an adult could be trusted. Daddy says you're important, that you run a company. I try to. He also says you're scared of people. Is that true? Lucas intervened. Sophie, that's not... It's fine. Arya knelt to Sophie's eye level, a gesture that looked unpracticed but genuine. Your dad's right. I am a little scared of people. Sometimes they're unpredictable. People are supposed to be unpredictable. That's what makes them interesting. Sophie held out her rabbit. This is Mr. Hopsworth. He's my best friend. You can hold him if you want, but be careful because his ear is loose. Arya took the rabbit with the careful reverence of someone handling a priceless artifact. Mr. Hopsworth is an excellent name. I know. I thought of it myself. Sophie moved to the kitchen, opening cabinets with the shameless nosiness of childhood. Do you have snacks? I have... Arya looked helplessly at Lucas. I'm not sure what constitutes appropriate snacks for children. Anything that isn't vegetables? Sophie called from inside the pantry. They ordered pizza. Sophie gave a detailed presentation about her school's drama production while eating 4 slices and getting sauce on Arya's white sofa. Arya looked mildly panicked, but didn't comment, which Lucas counted as a minor miracle. Can I see your bedroom? Sophie asked, because boundaries were not yet part of her vocabulary. Lucas started. It's fine. Arya stood, gesturing down the hallway. It's just a room. Lucas followed because leaving them unsupervised felt dangerous for reasons he couldn't articulate. Sophie inspected Arya's bedroom with the thoroughness of a detective, commenting on the lack of pictures, the excessive number of pillows, and the fact that the closet was bigger than our whole apartment. Do you have a family? Sophie asked, sitting on the bed with Mr. Hopsworth. Not really. My father died. My mother lives in Connecticut. We don't talk much. Why not? We disagree about most things. That's sad. Family is supposed to talk even when they disagree. That's what Daddy says. Arya looked at Lucas, something vulnerable crossing her face. Your daddy is usually right about things. I know. He's pretty smart when he's not being worried. After Sophie fell asleep on Arya's obscenely expensive sofa, Lucas carried her to the car while Arya watched from the doorway, looking uncertain and soft in the dim light. How did I do? Arya asked. She likes you. The Mr. Hopsworth introduction is sacred. That means you passed the test. There was a test? Everything with kids is a test. You did fine. I didn't know what to say half the time. Nobody does. That's normal. Arya leaned against the doorframe. She's wonderful. You're doing a good job with her. I'm doing my best with her. There's a difference. She knows you love her. That's more than a lot of kids get. Lucas shifted Sophie's weight, feeling the familiar ache of parenting while exhausted. I should go. Get her to actual bed. Lucas. Arya caught his free hand. Thank you for trusting me with this. With her. I know it's not easy. You're part of my life now. She's the most important part of my life. Eventually those things had to intersect. Still, thank you. He kissed her goodbye with his daughter sleeping against his shoulder, and the domesticity of it, the absolute normalcy, felt more revolutionary than any contract they'd signed. At his father's welcome home dinner 3 days later, Lucas's dad looked better than he had in years. Still thin, still recovering, but alive in a way that had seemed impossible 6 months ago. You did good, son, his father said, gripping Lucas's hand with surprising strength. Whatever it cost, whatever you had to do, you did good. Lucas thought about Arya in her penthouse, about contracts and desperation and the unexpected grace of finding something real in the wreckage of necessity. Yeah, Dad. I think maybe I did. The board meeting 6 weeks later was routine, quarterly reports, budget approvals, the standard corporate theater. But one member, Carson, the one who'd changed his vote, approached Arya afterward with the cautious respect of someone who'd learned a lesson. You were right, he said, about the IP clauses, about the liability. I should have done my homework before pushing the acquisition. Yes, you should have. For what it's worth, you've proven yourself. Not that you needed my approval, but you have it anyway. Thank you. Arya's voice was neutral, professional. I appreciate that. After he left, Arya texted Lucas. Carson apologized. Hell might be freezing over. Lucas. Or people are capable of growth when you give them evidence they were wrong. Radical concept. Arya. You're having dinner with me tonight. This is non-negotiable. Lucas. Yes, ma'am. Sophie too? Arya. Obviously. Tell her I found organic fruit snacks. The good ones. Arya. I researched child nutrition. It's a skill set I'm developing. Lucas smiled at his phone, feeling the strange sensation of happiness that came without conditions or contracts attached. The notification came on a random Tuesday morning 2 months later. Arya sat in her office, reviewing acquisition proposals for a biotech startup, when her phone chimed with a reminder she'd set weeks ago. Time to take the test. She'd been tracking everything, cycles, timing, probability, with the same precision she applied to market analysis. But somehow, sitting in her office with the pregnancy test in her purse, she felt completely unprepared. The contract said this would happen. Expected it. Planned for it. But the contract was filed away in a drawer somewhere, irrelevant now that the relationship had evolved beyond transactional boundaries. She texted Lucas, "Can you come to the penthouse tonight, earlier than usual, around 7? Lucas, "Everything okay?" Arya, "Fine. Just need to talk." She took the test in her office bathroom, the executive suite suddenly feeling absurd for something so intimate and terrifying. 3 minutes felt like 3 hours. When the result appeared, Arya stared at it with emotion she couldn't categorize. Pregnant. The thing she'd contracted for, planned for, built an entire legal agreement around. And now that it was real, all she could think was how much had changed since that contract was signed. Lucas arrived at 7:04 p.m., concern written across his face. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." Arya stood by the windows, the test hidden behind her back like evidence. "I just needed to tell you something." "You're being cryptic. That usually means bad news." "It's not bad news. It's just news." She turned to face him, decision crystallizing. "I'm pregnant." The words hung there, impossible to take back. Lucas went very still. "You're sure?" "Took 3 tests, all positive. I have a doctor's appointment Friday to confirm, but statistically speaking, 3 positives means you're pregnant." Lucas sat down heavily on the sofa. That's what we were trying for." "It is." "So the contract is fulfilled." Arya's chest tightened. "Technically, yes. The terms specified termination upon confirmed pregnancy." "Right. The terms." Lucas looked at her and she couldn't read his expression. "So what happens now?" "That depends." "On what?" "On what you want to happen." Arya moved to sit beside him, the test still clutched in her hand. "The contract said you'd walk away. No parental rights, no obligations, no further contact. That was the deal." "That was before." "Before what?" "Before everything. Before I knew you. Before Sophie started asking when she could visit again. Before I started thinking about futures that involved more than just survival." Arya felt tears threaten, unusual, unwelcome, completely overwhelming. "I don't want you to walk away. I don't want to walk away either. But the contract, forget the contract. The contract was written by 2 people who didn't know each other and were too scared to hope for anything better. We're not those people anymore. So what are we?" Lucas took the test from her hand, studying the positive result with an expression caught between awe and terror. "We're 2 people who did everything wrong and somehow ended up somewhere right. We're complicated and messy and probably going to screw this up in new and creative ways." That's not reassuring. "We're also in love, even if you're too scared to say it out loud yet. And we're having a baby, apparently. And we're going to figure out how to make this work. Because the alternative is unthinkable." Arya let the tears fall then, relief and fear mixing into something she didn't have corporate terminology for. "I am scared. I'm terrified of being a mother, of disappointing this child the way I disappointed my father, of not knowing how to be soft when I've spent my whole life being sharp." "Then we'll figure it out together. You'll teach them to be strong. I'll teach them to be kind. Sophie will teach them about stuffed rabbits and the correct ratio of chocolate chips to ice cream. We'll all muddle through and hope that love is enough to cover the gaps." "You said love." "I did." "I love you too. Even though it's terrifying and inconvenient and completely against every rule I set for myself." Lucas pulled her close, and Arya let herself be held. A gesture that had once felt like weakness, but now felt like the only honest thing in a life built on carefully maintained control. We should tell Sophie, Lucas said into her hair, that she's going to have a sibling, that she's going to have a family, a weird, unconventional, slightly broken family. But family. The doctor confirmed it Friday. 8 weeks along, healthy, progressing normally. Arya sat on the examination table, Lucas holding her hand, both of them staring at the ultrasound screen showing something too small to be real but too present to deny. Everything looks good, the doctor said. Do you have any questions? Arya had approximately 10,000 questions about what came next, about how to prepare, about whether children could tell when their mothers were terrified of breaking them. We're good, Lucas said, squeezing her hand. We'll figure it out. They told Sophie over ice cream, because apparently all major life announcements in Lucas's family happened over ice cream. Sophie listened with the serious attention of a child processing information that would fundamentally change her world. So you're having a baby, Sophie said, chocolate chip ice cream forgotten. With Arya. Yes, Lucas confirmed, which means I'll have a brother or sister. Yes. Sophie looked at Arya, her expression unreadable. Will you still have time for me when the baby comes? Arya's throat closed. Always. I promise. You're not being replaced. You're getting added to. And Daddy? We'll still be your daddy, first and always. Lucas pulled Sophie into a hug. This doesn't change how much I love you. It just means there's more love to go around. Sophie thought about this, eating her ice cream while processing implications. Finally, can I teach the baby about Mr. Hopsworth? Absolutely, Arya said, feeling something crack open in her chest. Mr. Hopsworth education will be essential. Okay then, I guess it's fine. Sophie returned to her ice cream, the matter apparently settled with the swift efficiency of childhood logic. The pregnancy progressed. Arya's company stabilized. Lucas took on a major design contract that actually paid what he was worth. His father continued recovering, strong enough to start asking pointed questions about the woman Lucas was suddenly spending all his time with. She's good for you, his father said one Sunday when Lucas brought Sophie for a visit. Makes you smile in a way I haven't seen since before the divorce. She's terrifying and brilliant and terrible at emotions, but yeah, she's good for me. And the baby? Due in March. We're not finding out the gender. Arya says she's controlled enough variables in her life and is leaving this one to chance. His father laughed. I like her. When do I get to meet her properly? Soon. She's nervous about family stuff. Her father wasn't exactly warm and fuzzy. Then we'll show her what actual family looks like. The messy, loud, imperfect kind. They merged households slowly, carefully, with the kind of planning Arya excelled at. Lucas and Sophie moved into the penthouse because Lucas's apartment was too small and Arya's space was too empty. They compromised on furniture, some of her expensive pieces, some of his lived-in comfort. Sophie got her own room with windows overlooking the city and a new rabbit to keep Mr. Hopsworth company. This is weird, Sophie announced on their first night in the new space. But good weird. Good weird is an excellent assessment, Arya agreed, looking around at the apartment that now held evidence of other people's lives. Sophie's backpack by the door, Lucas's design sketches on the counter, Mr. Hopsworth on the sofa. Are you going to marry Daddy? Sophie asked with the bluntness only children could achieve. I don't know. We haven't discussed it. You should. Then you'd be official family instead of just living together family. Is there a difference? Mom says there is. But Mom also says a lot of things that are probably wrong, so who knows? Lucas emerged from the kitchen where he'd been attempting to organize Arya's cabinets into something functional. What are we discussing? Whether you and Arya are getting married, Sophie said. I think you should. She thinks it's complicated. Everything's complicated with us. That's kind of our thing. Lucas looked at Arya, something unspoken passing between them. But yeah, eventually, when we're ready, when's that? When it feels less like checking a box and more like choosing something we both want. Sophie seemed satisfied with this answer, returning her attention to the cartoon playing on Arya's obscenely large television. Later, after Sophie was asleep in her new room, and Lucas and Arya were attempting to navigate sharing a bedroom that had once been exclusively Arya's controlled domain, Lucas brought it up again. Did that bother you? Sophie asking about marriage? No, she's perceptive. It's a logical question given the circumstances. But I spent years thinking marriage was a trap. a performance of something I couldn't authentically be. Arya turned to face him in the darkness. And then you happened, and Sophie happened, and suddenly I'm thinking maybe it's not about performing. Maybe it's just about choosing someone and letting them choose you back. Is that what you want? To choose me officially? I chose you when I asked you to stay that first night instead of leaving at 1 a.m. Everything since has just been following that choice through. She found his hand under the expensive sheets. But yes, eventually, when it feels right instead of obligatory. No contract this time? No contract, just two people figuring it out as they go. That's terrifying. Everything good is terrifying. You taught me that. March arrived with unexpected snow. Unusual for the city, but beautiful in the way disruptions could be. Arya went into labor on a Tuesday morning, 3 days before her due date, while reviewing quarterly projections that suddenly seemed completely irrelevant. "Lucas," she said, her voice remarkably calm considering the contraction that had just doubled her over. "I think it's time." The hospital was chaos and waiting, and eventually, after 14 hours that felt like 14 years, a sound that made everything else disappear. A baby crying, healthy and furious and absolutely perfect. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, placing the tiny, angry creature on Arya's chest. Arya stared at her daughter with the same intensity she'd once applied to acquisition contracts, trying to process that something this small and vulnerable had come from her body and was now her responsibility forever. "She's perfect," Lucas said, his voice thick. "She's terrifying." Same thing. Sophie met her sister the next day, bringing Mr. Hopsworth and a card she'd made that said, "Welcome home, baby," with approximately 47 stickers. "She's really small," Sophie observed, peering into the hospital bassinet. "She'll grow," Lucas assured her. "Can I hold her?" Arya, who was exhausted and overwhelmed and still processing that she'd successfully created a human, nodded. Lucas helped Sophie sit properly, then carefully transferred the baby into her arms. Sophie looked down at her sister with an expression of wonder and responsibility. "Hi, baby. I'm Sophie. I'm your sister. I'm going to teach you everything important, like which ice cream flavors are best and why rabbits are excellent friends and how to deal with grown-ups when they're being weird." The baby, who they decided to name Emma after Lucas's grandmother, made a small noise that might have been agreement. "I think she likes me," Sophie announced. "Everyone likes you," Arya said, feeling tears threaten again. Hormones, exhaustion, the overwhelming reality of having two children looking at her like she knew what she was doing. Lucas sat on the edge of the hospital bed, his arm around Arya, both of them watching Sophie introduce Emma to Mr. Hopsworth with the seriousness of a sacred ritual. "We did it," Lucas said quietly. "We did something. I'm not sure what yet. We built a family from nothing, from a contract written by people too scared to hope for anything real. We took the worst possible foundation and built something good anyway. You think it's good? Look at them." Lucas gestured to Sophie and Emma. "Yeah, I think it's good." 3 months later, on a random Saturday with no particular significance, Lucas proposed. Not with a grand gesture or expensive ring, just with a question asked while they were doing dishes after dinner, Sophie and Emma both asleep. The apartment finally quiet. "Marry me," he said, hands in dishwater, no preamble. Arya nearly dropped the plate she was drying. "What?" "Marry me. Officially, not because of contracts or obligations or trust fund requirements. Just because I want to choose you every day for the rest of my life, and I want you to choose me back." "That's the worst proposal I've ever heard." "It's the only proposal you've ever heard." "Fair point." Arya set down the dish towel, turning to face him. "Yes. Yes? Yes. I'll marry you, despite the terrible proposal and the dishwater hands and the fact that we're both disasters pretending we know what we're doing." Lucas kissed her then, soapy hands and all, and somewhere in the next room Emma started crying with the impeccable timing of infants everywhere. "I'll get her," Arya said. "We'll both get her. That's how this works now." They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony with just family and a few close friends. Sophie was the flower girl, Emma was held by Lucas's father, and Arya wore a dress that cost less than her usual work suits because she'd learned that expensive didn't always mean meaningful. The vows were simple. No 30-page contracts, no terms and conditions. Just two people promising to try, to show up, to choose each other even when it was hard. especially when it was hard. I love you, Arya said, her voice steady despite the tears. You taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, that control isn't the same as safety, that sometimes the best things happen when you stop trying to plan everything and just let life be messy and complicated and real. I love you, Lucas said. You taught me that survival isn't the same as living, that asking for help isn't failure, that sometimes the worst circumstances create the best opportunities if you're brave enough to see them. They kissed as husband and wife, and Sophie cheered and Emma made baby noises that might have been approval. And somewhere in the background, Arya's mother dabbed at her eyes while Lucas's father beamed with the pride of someone who'd watched his son nearly break and then slowly rebuild into something stronger. The reception was small, held in the penthouse that now felt like home instead of a showroom. Arya's company had just closed its largest acquisition yet, purchased on her terms, proof that she'd been right about her vision all along. Lucas's design firm was growing, steady work with clients who actually appreciated his talent. Sophie had adjusted to her new school with the resilience of children everywhere. Emma was healthy, hitting milestones, destroying sleep schedules with cheerful tyranny. Life was complicated and messy, and nothing like the controlled environment Arya had once insisted she needed. It was also good. Really good. Late that night, after everyone had left and the girls were asleep, and the city lights painted patterns across the floor, Lucas and Arya stood by the windows where this had all started. Do you ever think about it? Arya asked. The contract. Where we started. Sometimes. Usually to marvel at how desperate we both were. I was so certain I could control everything. Keep it transactional. Protect myself from feeling anything real. How'd that work out? Terribly. Best failure of my life. Lucas pulled her close, and Arya let herself be held, the gesture as natural now as breathing. You know what I think? What? I think we were never really strangers making a transaction. I think we were two people who needed each other in ways we didn't understand yet. The contract just gave us permission to show up until we figured out what we actually wanted. Which was? This, all of it. The mess and the fear and the love and the family we built from nothing. Arya looked out at the city, thinking about the woman who drafted that contract, isolated, terrified, convinced that control was the only path to safety. That woman felt like a stranger now. I'm glad you answered my text, she said quietly. I'm glad you came to Meridian Tower. I'm glad you were desperate enough to say yes and stubborn enough to stay. I'm glad you were lonely enough to ask, honest enough to put it in writing, brave enough to let it become something more. They stood there, watching the city move through its late-night rhythms. Two people who'd started with a contract and ended with a marriage, who'd traded transaction for trust, who'd learned that sometimes the worst beginnings led to the best endings. Somewhere in the apartment, Emma started crying. Lucas moved to check on her, but Arya caught his hand. Wait, just one more minute. She's crying. She'll survive 60 seconds. I just want to stand here and appreciate this. All of it. The mess we made and the life we built and the fact that we're actually happy despite doing everything wrong. We didn't do everything wrong. We just took the scenic route. The very scenic route. Emma's cries intensified, and they both laughed, breaking apart to handle the reality of parenting an infant who didn't care about sentimental moments. But later, after Emma was fed and changed and back to sleep, after they'd checked on Sophie and locked the doors and brushed their teeth side by side in the bathroom like couples in commercials, Lucas and Arya lay in the darkness and felt the weight of everything they'd built. No regrets? Lucas asked. About what? Any of it. The contract. The desperation. The mess. Arya thought about it, really thought about the woman who'd written that contract, so certain she could buy what she needed and keep her heart safe. About the man who'd signed it, so desperate to save his father that he'd sold pieces of himself. About how they'd both been wrong about what they actually needed. No regrets, she said finally. Just gratitude that we were both desperate enough to try and brave enough to let it become real. That's very sentimental for someone who used to communicate exclusively through legal terminology. You've corrupted me with emotions and domesticity. I'm ruined for corporate sociopathy. Good. They fell asleep like that, hands linked under sheets that had witnessed a contract become a marriage, a transaction become a family. Two broken people become something whole enough to carry each other through whatever came next. And in the morning, when Emma woke them too early, and Sophie demanded pancakes, and the city stretched out beyond the windows with all its chaos and possibility, they faced it together. Not because a contract required it, because they chose it. Every single day, they chose it. And that made all the difference.